My fellow citizens of all nations, right now we're going to talk about Carl Von Clausewitz, von Kriege, in other words, on war, and we're going to go through the notes, detailed notes I've made about this book, which will help us to understand this book and general summary of the work. I'm going to give you the more details of the certain related certain quotes and how it's explained by the author as well. And before we start going through the notes, I want to tell you that pay very close attention to this work, because this is not related to war only. This is life. Life is a war. Just like, and not only in our own life this advice is useful, but in business world as well, in the terms of leadership, because the war is the endeavor of human, where you have to make decisions, and tough decisions most of the time, and most of the time you have little information, or some informations are simply not true, deceptive, unchecked, etc. This is what as a commander you have to face as a general in the war. So these teachings, and by the way, have this thing in perspective. This work of Carl Von Clausewitz is so important that every general, worthwhile general, knows this work on the planet. This is how important this work is. So let's start it. What is war? This is the first question. And the answer to this question is this. War is nothing but a duel on an extensive scale. War is an act of violence. Now, when he says here that war is nothing but a duel to death, basically it's an act of violence. And then he continues. And this essentially defines war as a violence. And now look at this violence. Take the violence. This violence arms itself with the inventions of art and science in order to contend against violence. Essentially, violence fights violence in war. This is the war. The uncontrollable violences like face each other and clash each other. And one of them will crash. The one will survive. Basically, will conquer the other one. There is no moral force without the conception of states and law. Basically, these certain arbitrary laws that are given to military personnel, for example, these days, it's just an arbitrary. In itself, it has nothing to do with the war. It's a paper law, not by any means adapted to real world. Basically, those specific laws to behave that way, etc., have nothing to do with real world. It's just a paper laws that have nothing to do with war itself. Two motives lead men to war: instinctive hostility and hostile intentions. Think about it. Instinctive hostility and hostile intentions. And there is a mention there that even most civilized nations may burn with passionate hatred of each other. Really interesting remark. The passionate hatred of each other. Aim of all action in war is to disarm the enemy, obviously. If one has an interest in acting, then the other one must have interest in waiting. Calculation of probability based on given circumstances. Probabilities and conjecture. On war you face unknown. That's the thing. There is no human affair which stands so constantly and so generally in close connection with chance as war. But together with chance, the accidental, and along with it, good luck, occupy a greater place in war. And just, you have to clap for him for explaining this thing. It's so true. And this is true not only, and I've been thinking about it, this thing is true not only in war, but in our life, generally in human life as well. In a human life, there are lucky people and there are unlucky people as well. Because they are born there and there instead of that place and that place. We see therefore how from the commencement the absolute, the material, mathematical as it is called, nowhere finds any sure basis in the calculations in the art of war, and that from the outset there is a play of possibilities, probabilities, good and bad luck, which spread about with all the coarse and fine threads of its web, and makes war of all branches of human activity the most like a gambling game. It's genuinely like that. It's like playing a Russian roulette. There is one bullet, there is five in place. Good luck. The range which the display of courage and talents shall get in this realm of probabilities and of chance depends on the particular characteristics of the general and his army, but the political objects belong to the government only. I disagree with this statement. General also, it's like if general knows that his government is not the best possible government, he has to interfere. The great example would be General Georgi Mazniashvili. Uh, he wrote memoirs, and he made this crucial mistake in his life, and he ended up really horrible way. But he was a great general, by the way, powerful general. And we're going to have his memoirs review in this channel. Every activity in war necessarily relates to the combat either directly or indirectly. To fight at the right time and place. Essentially, army advances for the sole purpose, to fight at the right time and the right place. Because army can easily fight on wrong time in damn wrong place. That's what it implies there. But postponement of the action. Basically, postponement of the action relates to the, let's say the commander-in-chief knows that he has to make this bloody solution for this crisis, and he postpones the action. Now, what you don't realize as a commander-in-chief is that your idea of not making a decision is already action. That decision is already active decision that implies certain things. So if you know that if you take this action, you have huge loss on your side, like not making a decision is also a decision, whether you like it or not. So you cannot just freeze. It won't help. All this must retain before us and bear constantly in the mind in the consideration of each of the succeeding subjects. If we would rightly comprehend their true relations and proper importance, and not become involved instantly in the most glaring contradictions with the reality, and at last with our own selves. Basically, the last part, page attention. And not become involved incessantly in the most glaring contradictions with the reality. You cannot contradict the reality in the military. Like, you are done if you do that. At last with our own self. And you have to be true with yourself as well. Now, war is a province of danger, and therefore courage above all things is the first quality of the warrior. And now, the explanation of the courage. Courage is of two kinds. First, physical courage, or courage in presence of danger to the person. And next, moral courage, or a courage before responsibility, whether it be before the judgment seat of external authority or of the inner power, the conscience. And we only speak here of the first one. Resolution is an act of courage in single instances, and if it becomes a characteristic trait, it is a habit of the mind. But here we do not mean courage in the face of bodily danger, but in face of responsibility, therefore, to a certain extent against moral danger. The mind must therefore first awaken the feeling of courage and then be guided and supported by it, because in momentary emergencies the man is swayed more by his feelings than his thoughts. Have this in your mind, like pay this close attention to what Joseph read. Power to listening to reason in the midst of the most intense excitement, in the storm of most violent passions. You can call this power strength of soul or mind or self-commandability. Trust alone is but a weak motive of action with men, and hence there is always a great difference between knowing and acting, between science and art. The man receives the strongest impulse to action through the feelings, and the most powerful succor, if we may use the expression, through those faculties of heart and mind which we have considered under the term of resolution, firmness, perseverance, and force of character. What kind of mind comes closest to military genius? Then look at the subject as well as at experience will tell us that searching rather than inventive minds, comprehensive minds rather than such as have a special bent, cool rather than fiery heads, are those to which in time of war we should prefer to trust the welfare of our women and children, the honor and safety of our fatherland. Now it's a very interesting thing to mention there that, in a lower position, let's say a man is in charge of 10 people in war, that man can take the responsibility. But if you were to give that man in position in charge of 1,000 men, that man can completely fail. That's a very interesting thing, which I'm in business as well, in that sense that you may be paying someone like 5K, and suddenly you increase his salary or her salary to 10K or 50 or whatever, and suddenly her performance drops instead of, like, you would expect opposite. This thing is observed in business world as well. Like, his performance drops instead of going up, which is kind of surprising thing. But in the military thing, observed this how many years back then. Usually, before we have learned what danger really is, we form an idea of it which is rather attractive than repulsive. Danger in war belongs to its friction. A correct idea of its influence is necessary for trust of perception. Profession, like people that actually have seen war, nobody wants another war. Like people that actually seen, what type of war, like where there is like a real struggle. There is a real struggle going on. Nobody wants to see fight that type of war again. Like, no one wants to do that. Now it's a completely different type of war if you are involved in war where you are on the side of absolute powerful force and your enemy is weak as hell. Now that's not the reality of the war. Like if you like a close military powers fight, which was the reality of that time of Europe, like military powers that are close to each other, like that struggle is completely different struggle than the one I mentioned before. And also the war, what is war? You fight when there is rain, when there is whatever weather, you see your friends, the people you don't even know, their body parts exploding, suddenly you see the drop down hand there, different body parts, your childhood, you may see deaths of your own childhood friend, the fear, the smell, the specific smell, you can imagine this thing, like smell of what? Blood, dirt, shit, piss, some people do that. Like, all those things combined together, players screaming and mourning of people that are wounded. All those things combine these things together. Like you may be even like mortally wounded, or you are literally drowning yourself some sort of a pit, but you can stand up. You're wounded. Like, think about the war in that term and try to glorify that thing after. Try to glorify that thing after that. Okay, there's this glorification of the war, which is stupid. Great part of the information obtained in war is contradictory. A still greater part is false, and by far the greatest part is of a doubtful character. This is the reality of war. Everyone is inclined to magnify the bad in some measure. That's also the thing. It is therefore this friction, or what is so termed here, which makes that which appears easy in war difficult in reality. Yeah, like by imagination, like war seems kind of easy for naive people. But what I've just explained, after that perspective, do you have the same real perspective to war? Now, habit gives strength to the body in great exertion, to the mind in great danger, to the judgment against first impression, habitation of an army to war. Basically, you can get this through experience. And here's a great advice. Always seek to procure some officers who have done good service at different stands of warfare. Basically, if you're in charge, be like, okay, there is this neighboring country. Let's say your country has a long time peace. Invite your like neighboring countries, the generals and lieutenants and some people in military authority, and have them train your army. What it implies in military, in business world, train your not troops but your personnel you have. Train them, give them education, the practical things that they can use every day, and you can invite these people there and do different. Invite some people for that and do different kind of stuff. So be creative in that sense. And there is no reason to not to use that thing. It's very important. The people that have actual practice, or that maybe like theoretical whatever, like, invite that people, use them. They will be also glad to comply. The whole creation of troops, that is leaving them, arming, equipping and exercising them, belongs to art of war. Important part is the training part as well as equipping, etc. is part of war. Tactics is the theory of the use of military forces in combat, and strategy is the use of combats for the object of the war. Now, by the strategic plan is settled when, where, and with what forces a battle is to be delivered, and to carry that into execution is the march is the only means. I mean, this is true, I mean, these days, like march is the only means. In war, all is undetermined, unless you send some sort of... Okay, this is iconic saying, if you pay attention to. In war, all is undetermined, but it's not just the channel is focused on popular, but this thing as well. Like, why? Because in war, all is undetermined. Okay, why? Because so many delusional people, you see, they achieve certain things and they become delusional. Like, I was predestined for this. There was no factor of luck and stuff like that. So, and generally, most people obviously don't want to face this type of thing. But war clearly states, in war, all is undetermined. Life is as well. Courage is, however, by no means act of understanding, but likewise a feeling, like a fear. The latter looks to the physical preservation, courage to the moral preservation, element of danger. Basically, what it means latter is that the one that just runs away or etc. pays attention to preserve himself physically, to stay intact physically. Now the courageous character to moral preservation. The courageous character has his own whatever constitution, his own principles, a man of principles. He fights there, and he don't want his principles to be tarnished. That's why he will do anything. And these type of people are golden. Business such as war, which in its plan built upon general circumstances, is so often thwarted by unexpected and singular accidents. More must be left to talent, and less use can be made of a theoretical guide than in any other. Talent and genius act beyond the law, and their theory is in opposition to reality, and theory is in opposition to reality. Human mind is trained by the knowledge imparted to it, and the direction given to its ideas. Only what is great can make it great. The little can only make it little, if the mind itself does not reject it as something repugnant. No activity of the human understanding is possible without a certain stock of ideas. But there are, for the greater part at last, not innate but acquired and constitute this knowledge. Observation, therefore, by study and reflection. Very important thing. Let me read this. No activity of human understanding is possible without a certain stock of ideas. But there are, for the greater part at last, not innate but acquired and constitute this knowledge. Not innate but acquired things. Anything can be acquired through training. Knowledge must, by this complete assimilation with his own mind and life, be converted into real power. Knowledge must, by this complete assimilation with his own mind and life. Basically what it means, to actually practice that things in your life. Be converted into real power. War in its highest aspects consists not of an infinite number of little events, the diversities in which compensate each other, and which therefore by a later or worse method are better or worse governed, but of separate, great, decisive events which must be dealt with separately. Now about criticism. Basically, criticism or judgment of historical events, especially the battle, is usually judged from the perspective after that thing happened. So it's very easy to talk from that point. So the criticism should be really rational one, because you know what happened. So you think, oh, that general or king or whatever should not have done that thing on the battlefield. It's very easy to criticize after that thing happened, and even so, you may be saying that, oh, I don't take consideration what happened after that. No, you do. You still do take in consideration of the facts, basically the fact what will know, but that one did not knew it. So it's easy to see to imagine what you should have done when you see the whole puzzle, but the one during the time had only half of the puzzle and made the decision and failed. So, slow down a little bit, calm down. I mean, you on that place could have done some things even more worse. That's also a great point. There are cases in which the greatest daring is the greatest wisdom. Napoleon comes in our minds, obviously, when we talk about military stuff as well. Thus, it becomes intelligible how good luck in wars assumes a much nobler nature than good luck at play. This starts as well at the same time. That becomes intelligible how good luck in war assumes a much nobler nature than good luck at play. So, Dwayne, think about this in terms of life, how this plays. Basically, people that just had luck, but the people that it's easy that in life are basically good players just failed, but people just elect succeeded. This is life, welcoming life, man. The first evil which we constantly stumble upon is a lame, totally inadmissible application of certain one so cited system as a formal code of laws. This is disaster. When like some ideologies or etc. Like, applied blindly. This is the demon stupid. But there are matters where a whole dozen of cases forward would prove nothing. If, for instance, there are facts of frequent occurrence and therefore a dozen other cases which, with an opposite results, might just as easily be brought forward. The farther we go back, the less useful becomes military history. As it gets so much the more meager and barren of detail, the most useless of all is that of the old world. Because war is dependent on instruments and instruments it's used. And if you remember what I just said, like before in the beginning, like violence arms itself with this art and inventions. And if you think about this in these terms, the many parts of this book becomes useless. Why? Because of technology. Just think about last 50 years. How like war, everything is changed essentially in war. Like entire war story is to be rewritten. Like war became a completely different thing than it was 100 years back or during World War II. Like so many things changed. Now the war can be like there is informational war, etc. And the greatest part when I read this thing, it's just I could not help but think about this Vietnam War. What happened there, like during the Vietnam War? How things changed? Like United States essentially was forced to pull back because the generals lost their war not on the front line. Like military didn't lose on the front line, but the military lost the public support of the war. And it's a democratic nation. What happens when you don't have public support? You have to back off. And this is what Carl Von Clausewitz did not even pay attention because he wasn't living in democracy, etc. So it wasn't a real issue at the same time. But like there's this example of what happened during the Vietnam War. U.S. versus Vietnam, like it's a very fascinating thing because like U.S. forces like fall like hard, like really hard. They fall really hard there. The Viet Cong at some point attacked the military base of United States, but the United States managed to retain all their bases. But that incident, like they won there on the battle, but they lost the battle there back home. So there were protesters to pull back from pull troops from war, etc. So the military was the government essentially was forced to pull off. This thing wouldn't happen before. Like this is, and now think about the technology that we have today. So many things. We have to think about like war in space. There are this then the information warfare, and we can just observe with satellites, and we have to destroy enemy satellites and war under the sea. Oh man, like the endeavor of war became far like the hardest thing in human life. The war is that. This is what it became essentially, and it becomes through advancement of technology. And we can have like robot drones and etc. Yeah. For humans, the war becomes even more deadly and dangerous because what we humans can do right now cannot be compared to what happened during World War II. The whole trust, and nothing but the trust. Just have this man, it's a French quote. This is how it mentions in the book. The trust, the whole trust, and nothing but the truth. And army can only achieve something through its leader, never by itself. Just like there is this saying the army basically two armies, two armies versus each other. The one is army of lions led by a sheep, then the other one is the army of sheep led by a lion. The one that is led by a lion will achieve far more than the army of lions led by a sheep. This is the importance of a leader. True, like we have a lack of leadership problems in these days. Like the leaders are people. We are drawn to leaders, and army can only achieve something through its leader, never by itself. It's because army without leader is like a headless preacher. That's what leadership is supposed to be. And not only that, but I will mention it soon. Okay, continual development of new forces. Just have it in mind. Continual development of new forces. And no rule without exception. No rule is without exception, especially when we talk about military. Like no rule is fixed in military. Seriously, like this is what will show, like this the Viet Cong situation, etc. showed. So like no rule without exception. Generally, technological advancement, and throw so many examples show like no rule without exception. There were cases where there were enemies like twice as big enemies were beaten, and there are opposite cases as well, etc. So it's really complicated. Like just because the superior forces invade doesn't mean necessarily will obtain victory, and it also doesn't mean that it will necessarily lose. So it's the no rule without exception. Basically, there are cases that you should not advance stuff. Like it becomes complicated. And the last part is what I want to pay attention, and it's very like humongously important thing which Carl Von Clausewitz pays attention to. In lost battle, the power of an army is broken, the moral to a greater degree than the physical. The moral to a greater degree. What is moral? Moral is a spirit of an individual man to fight, to resist to death. This is what is moral is. Let's call it spirit or water, however it's would you like to call it. Like there is this thing that the certain soldier said it, that the warrior dies only once, but the coward dies every day. I will die only once, but the cowards are dying every single day from inside. Their spirits getting broken. And there is also this thing that, to me personally, is true as well. I would rather die, literally die, than be crippled here. I would rather die than be crippled there, because there is this demonstration of the spirit. That spirit should not be crippled. That's the most important thing. And not only in military, but in life as well. In life, we would call it self-esteem. The self-esteem is most important thing. That it doesn't mean to be delusional about your self-esteem, but that should not be crippled. That should be preserved and protected by your teeth or whatever means, or it just die protecting it. That's how important self-esteem is, or what he refers to as a moral degree, etc. And in fact, one of the forms of victory over his enemy. The first one was the physical victory, and the second one was moral victory. After the enemy, basically morally the enemy is crushed. That's a victory to you. If you manage to do it, you won the battle. That's how important that is. That's how important that is. And let me read this thing again. In lost battle, the power of an army is broken, the moral to a greater degree than the physical one. Okay, you have to, as a military, you have to make sure that the morale is protected, even after defeat, or even after temporary setbacks. Because if the spirit is broken, no, it's bad. The spiritual never broken. And at the same time, the one whose spirit is filled will die only once. The broken spirit will die every moment, every second. So that's a thing. Definitely, great book, truly great book, truly recommend to read it. Also, this summary. What do you think about summary of this book? Comment down below. Maybe you have some criticisms of this summary, or parts I can improve, or ideas, suggestions, or which part you find most interesting. Comment down below, share it with me, and if you are new to this channel and if you are not subscribed already, hit the subscribe button and hit the like button as well. See you.